All right.
Rebecca, you're on. I was going to say you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I was just making sure the live feed was ready to go. Thank you, Katie. Welcome, everyone. It's really an honor to be here with you right now. We have almost 100 people on here. We had almost 200 people register, so this may fill up as time goes on. Just to let you know that we are recording this and we are streaming it live on Facebook. So I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Rebecca Gorelli. I am an organizer with Arizona Educators United, as well as an organizer with National Educators United. And so we're really honored to have you here. Thank you for registering. And we'll just get started by asking you to introduce yourself just in the chat box. What's your name? What's your title? Are you with a union? Are you in a caucus? Are you with a United group? Just so we can kind of see who's in the room. So take a moment and do that in the chat box right now, please. Wow, welcome. It's so amazing to see so many folks from across the nation and super exciting to be here with you all. So thank you again for being here. I am going to pass it over to one of our facilitators. So Katie, would you like to come on in and introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I just introduced myself in the chat, but I am Katie Ehrlich. I am a facilitator with Washington State Educators Unite and a recent member with National Educators United, and I'm happy to be here. I teach special education in elementary school in Washington State. So some general housekeeping, please remain muted during the large group meeting and use the chat box for comments and questions. And there will be a little time at the end to have question and answers and a share out. Please use stack, meaning go into the chat box and type the word stack if you would like to speak. And then as you are called on, you can unmute yourself to speak verbally. So first, we just did some introductions. We will start with some safe return to school statements, some things that our committee came up with for what would be required to return to school safely. A union resolution and pledge, which is the same thing, but using union language. Some related issues that we found with safely returning to schools. We will have breakout sessions, so everyone will have a chance to comment and share their thoughts. And then we will have a share out and discussion back in the whole group. And then there will be some next steps. And there are a couple of guest speakers at the very end.
I'm Carla Oguchi with NEU and Virginia Educators United. And who we are a group of educators around the US. You can see Arizona, California, all of the states listed. We launched in December 14th in 2019, and we have thousands of members across the nation networking together, and we're growing rapidly. And we hope that if you're not part of us, that you'll join us, that you'll share with the rest of your colleagues who would like to amplify our voices. And the next slide. Why we started the Red for Ed movement. There's great debate as to which state it started in, but we have seen that when we come together as organizers and activists, that we can make positive change within our states. And we know that we have a lot of similarities across our educational systems. So we are a grassroots organization, and we're hoping that we can continue to amplify our voices together at the national level to save our public schools.
So some context behind what we're doing. Educators are coming together nationally to decide on a set of expectations that are to be met before returning to schools in person that are very important. And it is very important that educators set this expectation because it most impacts us, our students, our personal families, and our students' families. Those setting policies for schools are not typically educators themselves, so our voices must come together and be heard by our unions and the policymakers. It is important to stand together and stand firm as educators to ensure the health and safety of everyone. We want everything to return to normal, but as long as COVID-19 exists in our states, counties, and local areas, things will not be normal. Recognizing that things won't be normal for quite some time, we've put together a set of expectations that we believe are necessary prior to returning to buildings. Once these have been presented, we will have some time in smaller breakout rooms to discuss what has been stated and to provide feedback. We ask that discourse remain civil. It is important for us to receive feedback from as many states as possible and grade levels. There will be differing thoughts on when we return to school in person and how to return to school in fall based on area and grade level. So we encourage everyone to share.
Great. So Katie and I will be going through the 6 criteria that we are proposing that we created democratically as a group. These criteria were developed based on the guidance that we read from the CDC and the World Health Organization. And our hope is that educators and education workers and supporters, these are criteria that we can put forward democratically that would be in place before brick and mortar schools reopen in advance of actually having a vaccine. So this statement that you can see on the screen here is the one to present the 6 criteria, and Katie will start with the first one.
So number 1, we want to have controlled community transmission, which means at least 24 days of 0 reported new local community cases. And the amount of days that we need to go without any new cases has changed and might still change based on research, but we know that the incubation period is between 5 and 6 days on average, but it can be up to 14 days. So that's the pre-symptomatic period. So some infected persons are contagious during that period and then show symptoms after up to 14 days. So transmission from a pre-symptomatic case can occur before symptom onset. So that's very important. And then we know that the incubation period and quarantine time after someone is diagnosed with COVID-19 is typically 14 days. And then we found that the incubation period can be as long as 24 days. So that's why we need 0 reported local cases for at least this long.
Thank you. And the second criteria that we've set is rigorous testing and tracing. So having widespread, accessible, frequent screening, testing, tracing, and isolation of new cases. And this is a demand that has implications on multiple levels, on the federal, state, local, and school levels. So we are arguing that we need affordable, accessible tests distributed at the federal level and kind of organization for that at the federal level, as well as strong contact tracing and isolation, which often happens at the local level with local health departments. And then at the school level, we also would need systematic screening of students as well as a system for immediately notifying stakeholders of any new cases, which we discuss further in point 6. And there's information from the World Health Organization on the right there on some of the guidelines for what this type of system really should look like at the federal and, again, local levels.
The next thing is thorough protection and prevention. We need to make sure that there is rigorous cleaning and disinfection and proper ventilation within our schools and effective PPE provided for all students and staff. And that might be masks, sanitizer, frequent disinfection, all of those things, and remote work and learning for the most vulnerable students and staff. And there's a checklist for students and staff provided by the World Health Organization on the right. And something that came to me as I was thinking about this is students have no sinks. They have no way to regularly wash their hands. And then there's staffing and time allotted for regular cleaning and disinfection that goes above normal custodial duties. So that's something that will have to be considered as well. And then air conditioning and heat isn't necessarily proper ventilation. Many buildings and classrooms have windows that don't operate, don't open. So there may not be a way to properly ventilate classrooms.
The fourth criteria that we're proposing is consistent social distancing. So student and staff schedules are designed to ensure small, stable groups with at least 6 feet between all people at all times. which is, I think that this is something we've seen in the new CDC guidelines, guidelines for stable groups, not a lot of mixing between students, having that consistent spacing between students. But what I think is really important to recognize in what we're putting forward criteria is that the criteria build on each other. So we are not proposing that this type of social distancing and spacing happens in brick and mortar schools until we're at the point where local transmission is down. We're arguing that it is not sufficient to have these guidelines in the midst of an outbreak in a local community, that this really has to come once local transmission is down, and then it's possible potentially to open schools with, again, a very high standard of social distancing in this period before a vaccine exists. And there's some information on the right from the CDC and the guidelines there, which this is a shortened version, but consistent with their guidelines.
The fifth point is comprehensive student support. So we're talking primarily about nursing and counseling staff. The previous ratio provided from the National Association of School Nurses is 1 to 750 school nurses per student in the general population, and 1 to 225 for medically fragile students. And as it is, many schools don't even have a school nurse. We have a health room assistant, a paraeducator, or something like that in our health rooms, at least in my area. And that is not proper nursing staff, especially for those medically fragile students. And then ongoing monitoring as well to check for signs and symptoms, encourage people to stay home if they're sick, plan for students and staff when they get sick, and regular communicate with local authorities, staff, and families. And then monitor those absences and have flexible leave practices and be ready to close if there are increased cases. So, and then for counselors, we're looking at, many of our schools don't even have we have one full-time counselor for up to 700 or more students, which is not enough. We need a counselor or more than one in our schools that are trained in trauma-informed practices to assist students as well. So returning to school buildings during this pandemic would really require more nurses and more counselors than we currently have. And that's also a budget and staffing issue that needs to be addressed.
And so the sixth criteria that we're proposing, I think, is a really crucial one, that is proactive school closures. Plans to close schools and implement remote learning, equitable remote learning, if there are increased cases in the local area or a newly diagnosed case among staff, students, or their families. So here we are really making a distinction between proactive and reactive school closures. We are not supporting the idea that schools should be closed one at a time as cases arrive in the area. It would be too difficult to control an outbreak, and we know that even with better testing and tracing systems that we have now, that wouldn't be sufficient, and it wouldn't be safe for our students or for our families and communities. So we're arguing that if there's an increase in cases in the local area, then we would go, district-wide or local area-wide at the very least toward a distance learning or remote learning model again. And then also if there are diagnosed cases within the school community, so not just limited to school by school closures, as is proposed in some policies.
Hey everyone, so I'm Josh from California, Educators United. We made up a union resolution or a template or a sample that could be used, and I will share the link in the chat for this. All the materials from this, the slideshow and all the things that we share, we'll put into a folder and share with you all at some point. So I'm not going to read through this, but it has the same therefore it be resolved that we just went through. And it has the sources of all the information. It has like CDC and HWO scientific research that backs all this stuff, these criteria. I also have a couple examples of resolutions that were passed in locals. In my local, BFT, Berkeley Federation of Teachers, just as a idea of like different ways to write a resolution. And here's one from Oakland. So that's one tool that we can use, is to pass resolutions in our union locals to educate and to just have a statement that we can stand behind. Next slide, please. So we also developed a Google form that's a pledge that we can discuss later when we do the breakouts and the Q&A on this call about how we can use this, and I'm going to post that. Again, all these materials will be shared in a folder at some point later. Next slide, please.
So we know that there are a lot of other issues that we are concerned about as we talk about the safe return to schools and when our facilities are opened. We know that there are guidelines saying that you cannot share supplies anymore. And there's definitely seeing impacts on our budgets and what is going to be cut and who will no longer be employed and what will our class sizes look like or our class schedules. And then of course, privacy concerns around our testing. So those are some other issues that we know are being discussed and thought about. So at this point, we go to the next slide. And we're going to go into breakout rooms. When you're there, we would love for you to make sure that you state your name and state or grade level or subject. And we're going to discuss the 2 questions that you see before you. We will ask that somebody kind of be the note taker within your room, and the facilitators will be there to kind of guide the discussion. And then once we resume to the main group, please, if you're sharing out the notes, be mindful if somebody's already made the statement that you also have listed to just pick something else to share out.
So how many folks do you want in a breakout, Josh or Carla?
We'll try to evenly distribute it if we can. And if we can make sure that each of us are in one of those rooms, that'd be great.
Okay. Hang on one second, everyone. And I don't know why it's not letting me do a breakout room right now. Hang on. The button that is normally there is not there right now.
You come out of the share, sometimes it'll pop up.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yes, thank you. I'm like, that makes no sense. All right, we're gonna do, and how many minutes would you like it set for?
15 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to do 9 rooms, 10 people in each. $10 or 15, sorry, what'd you say?
15.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. All right, well, welcome back. I'm so sorry if some of you got cut off mid-sentence. I know we did. We had a really good conversation in our breakout room. So, Josh, would someone like to facilitate this discussion?
How much time do we have on the agenda? I need to look. We have 15 minutes for share out, so let me set a timer. The idea was that we get people to share out, and I can take notes, or someone else can take notes from our facilitator group,
Josh, I'll take notes. I have something set up.
but we don't want to repeat. So, okay, great, thank you. We want to call in each group, but not necessarily everyone has to share what they talked about. If there's going to be repeating information, let's try and just only say what is new to the conversation so we don't have redundancy. And we can just call in people. Rebecca, do you still have the list of the breakout rooms? So you have like a way to track
No.
that?
Nope,
Okay.
just breakout room 1, 2, 3, etc.
Okay, I don't know if you all remember like what rooms you're in. If you were in, I don't even know what room number I was in. So we can just go.
Josh,
If you would
really
like
fast.
to speak, could you just write stack in the chat? That would be a good tool.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
I just wanted to share really fast. I'm not sure if someone else sharing got this, but we had 230 or more people registered for this. And it looks like we had a maximum of 100 allowed in for some reason. We weren't sure why that happened, but that's something we really wish that everyone could be here, but we're sorry for anyone that got left out of this time. And we are streaming live on Facebook, so it's available to others, but yeah, thanks for all that can be here.
If you just got on the call, then we're just sharing out what we discussed in the breakout room. So you'll pick up on that hopefully and get gist of what we're saying. As far as the documents, we're going to share that out with all participants after the meeting, either through email, probably through email, because to make sure everyone gets it.
So I have someone who would like to go first. Hussein, would you like to jump in and describe what happened in our breakout room?
Sure, Rebecca, thank you. So I believe the first question was regarding our main concerns or top concerns. One theme that came out of our group especially was kind of the, it's very quaint to think that we could successfully social distance in a school setting, but it's kind of inevitable when you're talking about teenagers and children that any social distancing measures will probably fall flat. And we expressed concerns about that and the idea that, you know, if there is another reported case when we're in this physical setting and schools are closed down again, that's going to create a massive crisis of confidence in the community, which could lead to, you know, parents, pulling their kids out of school permanently, maybe going to online schools and things like that. That could be something that happens as a result of this. You know, parents are counting on us to eventually take care of their kids, and they see that as a signal for them to return back to work. So if that all kind of falls apart, that can create even more problems. So we expressed concerns about that. There were some concerns expressed about, you know, budgeting and trying to demystify state and district budgets and trying to better understand that so that you can have more substantive conversations about that. And one of the personal things that really matters to me is just that, we're seeing this budget issue happening, this economic situation that's occurring, and school districts are probably going to be inevitably short-staffed to deal with, these burgeoning class sizes and, this transition to remote learning. And I think all of us here that are educators can kind of speak to the fact that even people think that, things are easier by being at home and doing remote learning. And it's kind of unanimous that actually our jobs are much harder and much more demanding now as we work remotely. So that's just one thing that really concerns me, especially if we see downsizing with staffing.
I can go next. I can report out on our breakout.
Perfect.
So some of the priority concerns we had are the language from the state in California. It's probably somewhere in other places. It sounds like we're being experimented on. Like we're just gonna go in there and see what happens. If we go back to school, we don't really know. In other states, they have Republican legislators and they're in line with the president. So there is like lack of concern at all for safety, it seems. And we talked about the CDC regulations and how it doesn't seem possible to implement them. So we don't know how we could go back to school safely. And then the question came up about liability, like if a student gets sick, who's liable? Is the school district liable for that? If they decide to send students back without having proper safety measures in place? And then the idea about counselor ratios are already too high, and how can we possibly get them down to where they need to be for this crisis that we're going to need counseling for mental health. And as far as organizational tools, we talked about the resolutions that we shared would be a good thing to do in local unions, having demands for the district and also for the state. At sites, having building action teams or COVID action teams to reach out, and then having reps or leaders in the union reach out to schools that have little or no participation to try and build them up to a level where they are messaging members and getting people involved. On the national level, we talked about trying to pass this Children and Communities First Act. So looking at the bigger picture, teachers aren't the only ones that are going to be affected going back to work. Under these conditions, we want to link up with other workers who are under attack and make this more of a bigger movement for safety in the workplace. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right.
From our group, Brian was going to share out.
We have a little order happening. So we have Jeanette, Emily, Nino, and then Susan. So Jeanette.
All right. So I was in room 3. We were very fortunate to have a transportation specialist from our state of Virginia. So if we were to go back to a return to learn a brick and mortar setting, a bus can only hold 15 students versus 27 with the new guidelines. And bus drivers, our transportation specialists, are going to be within 1 foot away from all of our students. And many times they have to help our students with physical disabilities come onto a bus. So there's no social distancing happening there. And in terms of regulations for the state of Virginia, you're not allowed to have plexiglass or curtains. Others in our group voiced concerns about custodians and the fact that many of our buildings already have barely enough custodians to begin with, and then they're going to be cutting more custodians. So how are we going to keep up with the demands of the new guidelines with cleaning as much as we should be? In terms of expenses, we're concerned about the lack of funding we've had in public education and how we're going to fund the very expensive technology that we would be using in the buildings, i.e. touchless tech. It would be great. We should have had touchless tech for opening doors and other accommodations for students with physical disabilities. It's disheartening to know that now we're in a pandemic. Now we suddenly care about it when we should have cared about it all along. Others voice concerns about virtual learning. Nobody likes remotely teaching. This is not ideal. It isn't real learning. We are concerned that when our students come back to the brick and mortar setting, there are going to be a lot of cognitive deficits. But right now we want to uplift and uphold what's safe. This is not a long-term solution. We had another group member who voiced a concern about our families and our parents and guardians and their work schedule. If we were to do a hybrid model, how are we going to help our communities get back to work? How's that going to work out? We are also concerned about students and teachers who fear coming back. We are fearful and concerned about the ignorance that we are facing across the country with lack of social distancing and usage of face masks. And so since we are quarantined right now, people are already not taking those measures. So are they going to take those measures once we go back to our return to learn in the brick and mortar setting? And of course, lastly, those of us in the group who believe that we should be taking a more firm position, it could be demanding we won't go back until there's a cure or a vaccine. And if we do go back and we see that there are more waves, a second wave, a third wave, we have to be willing to take an action, whether it's a sick out or a strike. And that's it for me.
Emily's next. Emily, are you here?
Sorry.
Okay.
Talked about one teacher was a music teacher, and she has lots of instruments, and there's just no way to have, it's like 400 students, so there's no way to get one instrument per kid. So that just would involve a lot of cleaning. Let's say, talked about, just in general, like there's just too many students in the room to socially distance, and teachers really need to get close to their students in order to teach them. And how are we going to teach them if we have to stand behind the desk properly? I mean, yeah. We also talked about a little bit about the guidelines and about the 24 days of 0 reported cases. Like that seemed like it was a little too much. And then like organizing tools, we just talked about using the documents that you guys have. We didn't get too much into that because we were talking a lot about the other stuff. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the stuff you guys have already said is what we talked about too.
Perfect, thanks. Nino?
Yeah, so I was in breakout room 2. I actually remember the breakout room. And some of the concerns we spoke about were, one person said that in particularly Arizona, that the folks who want to open up the state are very fierce and energetic about that. And we also spoke about, or concerned about, like the concrete labor of our jobs. Like you can't teach PE, through a screen in the ways that it needs to be taught, as well as for early education, the teaching students phonemes and diagraphs and all these things that you just have to interact with a student face to face. There were some options, or there was somebody discussed in Michigan. They were laying out different options of like a hybrid of 50-50, partially coming to school a couple of weeks. One option was 100% online learning, and the other option was just like another hybrid version. I mean, also some of the things that I raised was that, I mean, in 2008, well, actually the Washington Post published an article saying that since that the vast majority of the public schools in this country have not recovered from the 2008 financial crisis, and a great deal of them are in double-digit deficits already. And the fact that the AFT and the NEA asked for $75 billion from Congress in the last relief fund and only got 13.5 billion, so we're some 60 billion short when we're throwing out trillions already. Like we could definitely find some money for our teachers, right? But given that we're already at a deficit and we're not even going to get what we demanded, then we should expect massive amounts of cuts, school closures, consolidations, but also, the role of technology with, Bill Gates and introducing technology to, seemingly make our life easier, but really just kind of cutting jobs, right? And kind of cutting labor and having to reskill and retool an entire working force almost overnight, which, right, you can't just go from like using a pick and axe to like, an iPad. It just doesn't work like that. But yeah, in terms of things we can do, I mean, obviously I raise that if we can expand the demands to embrace our families, because if the families are not doing well, then we can have all the supports we have in school and it can still kind of be a failure, right? So, I mean, I have students who students who are homeless, right? If they still don't have a home, then we can have everything in school be perfect, and these problems will still manifest. So I think we kind of have to expand beyond just teachers to think about, well, yeah, 2018 and 2019, teachers made those years the years of the strike. Like, that's how they remember the year of the strike, because of us, like because of teachers. So I think we do have some like momentum to really demand that we be taken seriously. Yeah, so I probably missed some things, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Susan is next.
Thanks, Nino. That was some really good points. So we've heard some really good things, and I want to continue on. One of the big things that we discussed in breakout room 6 was social emotional well-being, not only for our students, and I know that's been brought up, but training for staff. I will say that personally, I've been through some challenges in my own personal life, so I've become trauma practiced and trauma informed, which is carried over into my classroom. But I also know in my building and throughout my district, it's not district wide. So there's a wide variety of what teachers understand as far as how trauma comes out and the behaviors that students might have. And as I'm thinking of returning to school, is the social emotional well-being, because of course we hear a lot of language about academics, and we want to get them back on track, and we want to make sure that they're getting credits and that they're earning grades and all of those things. And I know some of that is shifting, and so training around the social emotional well-being, as well as I would propose providing that for teachers. And I know some districts do better than others. I'm not aware of what's happening throughout the nation, but I know in Washington State and in my district, we do have access to those resources, and I continue to do that. One of the things that was brought up in terms of a concern is that leadership, for example, in the California area, they had an event where people were together, and in California, they're being asked to wear masks in public, and the leadership of the building was not wearing the masks. So then that sets the tone, because if the admin are not wearing those. So there was a concern there. Also brought up in terms of when you do go into your rooms, because you haven't been in there for a while, there may be some bugs. So make sure you have some gloves, maybe take your gardening gloves, make sure you're wearing your tennis shoes closed-toed, don't go in your flip-flops and your shorts perhaps, because if you haven't been in your building or your classroom, you may have some unwanted guests. And then one thing that we didn't really bring up, but I want to mention while I'm on for just a moment, is I'm very concerned about the leave. So for district to district, and they're proposing here in Washington to follow the CDC guidelines and then make room for leave. And I'm looking here. So encourage anyone who is sick to stay home, plan for if students or employees get sick. I'm a single parent. I have 3 children living in the home with me. I get sick, I need to isolate for a minimum of 14 days. A kid gets sick, that's another 14 days. Another kid gets sick, because like at my urgent care room, I have a punch card, or I joke about it. Hey, I just was here last week with, son number 2, and now I'm here with son number 3. So that's a big concern for me, is do we have sufficient leave, and how can we go about encouraging that, that we don't get stuck in that place where we're coming to school not feeling well, because if we don't, we lose our job, or we don't have sufficient leave. So that's a big concern for me.
All right, thank you. Next is Lindsay.
Hi. So a lot of our conversation also went around a lot of the things that have already been discussed. Maintaining teaching and learning, and if we are going back in the classroom with the lack of funding to support teachers and aides within our room, how do we clean and sanitize and keep up with all of that? Also the logistics for parents. You have multi-children families, if they're all on different schedules in different grade levels, how can you have a split schedule where one kid goes in the morning, another kid goes in the afternoon, or maybe another district, your middle school child is on Monday, Tuesday schedule, and then the following week they're Wednesday, Thursday, and every other Friday. So looking at coming back with these different schedules is really kind of difficult for parents. And then also taking that distance learning off the parents' plate and having the kids be engaged is huge. Another thing that we talked about, and I feel it's very important, San Diego County is a huge county and we have a lot of kids and a lot of schools and everybody's doing something different. I think we need some consistency within our counties at least, to follow certain guidelines so that if a family does move within the county in a different district, it's not a hodgepodge of things that are happening. There's some consistency to keep everybody together. And that was pretty much it.
Great, thank you. Jerry? Jerry with a G? I don't know if that helps. All right, we'll do last call for Jerry. Are you here? Okay, if not, we'll move on to Brian. And if Jerry figures it out, then Jerry, come on back. All right,
Hey,
Brian.
everybody. So I'll be brief. A lot of good things were already covered. One of the things we talked about is the need to make sure when it gets down to the district level to be surveying both teachers and families before the plan goes out. Because if you've got a plan and teachers are too afraid that it's not safe, they're not going to come to work. And the same thing with families, the kids won't show up because they'll feel like it isn't a safe place to be. So we talked about that. We talked about, but also the need to organize and to go, what is a way to, under the current shelter in place reality, to get politicians to pay attention, to understand that it's important. I was joking that I live in two worlds because I'm a union president by day and my hobby is I'm a school board member. So I get the need to organize and to connect with me before the night of the decision, because then it's too late, right?
Thank you, Brian. Phyllis?
Hi, so a lot has already been said. So a few differences that kind of came out in our group that I don't think I remember hearing anyone state is we need to continue the waiver for big high stakes statewide testing programs for the next year, because we might be going in and out of school. We're not sure. Also, another different discussion point that our group came up with, they're calling for students to stay in one place, which a lot of the people in our group thought that's just not possible. It's not healthy, whether it's for little kids or high school students, and it's not very realistic, especially for high school students. And another significant point that I want to make that came out in our group, RSP teachers, resource teachers. Again, if the split schedule, it's, kids are going to be moved around. They're not going to have that consistency with their RSP, and possibly too, we're exposing kids to more germs if they're in childcare centers on the days that they're not in school. So I think that's about it, though. Those were the big differences that we had. Thank you.
Thanks. And I heard Jerry is here. Jerry. I'm looking around. Anyone see Jerry?
His mic's on.
He's on page 3.
He's on page 3.
Okay, coming back. Oh, I see you. Jerry, we can't hear you, friend. I see him talking.
He said the issue was that his mic is on, but it's not making any sound.
Is there anyone from Jerry's group that has the notes possibly?
I'm in Jerry's group. Jerry, maybe you could type it in the chat because we can't hear you.
Sometimes if you go in and then come back out, if you go out and come back in, it'll resolve the mic issue.
All right. Well, if we're having struggle, does anyone from his team want to step in?
I've already reported out from our breakout, so I don't have anything to add to that.
Oh, okay, maybe it was an addition. Okay, are there any other groups? I know Jerry's probably still working on it. Are there any other groups that need to report out or would like to add an additional thought? I don't see anything in the chat, so I suppose we can go back to the slide.
Kelly, I just have and I've seen it in here, again, from Arizona, being in the Washington Elementary School District. The kids would come on, for a day with us, or, an hour, and there were packets given to the kids the week before, but they were also informed that we were not taking grades. We were not. So, I mean, there was zero accountability. Yes, it was great to see the kids and interact with them. But obviously, if this is going to be social, or if it's going to go on, that there has to be some accountability for the students. And I've seen a lot of teachers posting on Facebook about, kids showing up the last day of school, submitting everything, and just, kind of, I hate to say it, but, a big old cluster for them, for people who are being accountable with the kids. So, I mean, it's got to change, one way or another. And I'm going to put it out there. Parents have we have to rely on the parents to be involved in any type of education, instead of just letting them go and do whatever. So I just want to put that out there. The accountability is a huge thing for our district.
Okay, Josh, can we have a time check?
You have 2 minutes, so we have time for one more comment.
Phaedra, somebody named Phaedra,
yes.
I think.
Yeah. So one thing that we brought up in our group that I haven't really heard addressed a lot is the younger grades trying to stay home and learn. I have no idea how that would be accomplished for, like, I teach high school, so it's not going to be a big deal, but second, third, fourth, fifth graders trying to stay home and learn while their parents are off at work. I have no idea how that would be accomplished at all.
Or pre-K people. I have 3 kids under the age of 6, so I feel you. Excellent, thank you. All right, I think we might be at time. Is everybody? Oh, Jerry's back. Jerry, you probably have 30 seconds to a minute. Are you capable of joining in?
Okay, can you hear me?
Woohoo!
Okay. Yeah. Well, just briefly, I live in in a very diverse area. There's very wealthy people who can work at home. There's a lot of people who are going to be compelled to not work home. And that's what I'm just thinking in advance about, which students are more likely to come back to school and which families are more likely to keep their kids away from school, and the obvious equity issues that are going to come up and how we're going to deal with that. Just because, and so that'll translate into various pressures we feel to return back to school as well. So previously somebody said, like, reaching out to other workers and not just teachers in terms of demanding a safe return. And I think that that's just an element of that. Like, we absolutely have to be connected to other parents who are also feeling pressure to go back to workplace situations that they may not feel safe. We need to be able to have a conversation with them as well as teachers going back to our own workplace, who will be helping to care for their children. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. I'll bring us back to the presentation if that's all right with everyone.
Could I say one thing?
Sure.
This is Yvette from Berkeley, and I just want to raise some people that asked in our small breakout room, and some other people have too, about testing and getting COVID-19 testing available for everybody. And I really want to encourage, everyone in our locals to fight for that as a bottom line prerequisite before we agree to any even approach to going back to those campuses. I can't emphasize it enough, because unless we have a valid and objective way to determine whether it's safe to go in, and also a way to determine who is or isn't infected so we can isolate, then it is a crapshoot no matter what. And I really want to emphasize that in places like California, we are really in danger, because if we had a Republican, we'd know not to trust them. But we've got Newsom, or we've got these school board members or superintendents who act like they're really, really supportive, but they're the ones who are going to do the dirty deed most. And they're already doing it. Newsom's already reopening our economy, and we have more deaths than ever in California. So we have to be the ones as educators. We have so much authority. We have to use it and exercise it and put our foot down and start establishing that right now.
All right, thank you for that. Josh?
I think it's Katie.
Oh, Katie, sorry.
Oh, is it me? So we are, for our next steps, we're sharing our statement out with you, and as well as on our Facebook groups around our state, the resolution in union language, and then the petition as well. I guess there's a hashtag on here. I didn't even see this until now. Not until it is safe. That's a big thing for us. This is all about safety. And we are holding town halls in, I know in my state we are, and in some other states we are, in local districts, and we're encouraging others to share this information as well, especially if you are part of a united group within your district or state. And then our committee continues to do outreach and plan for follow-up actions.
There's some more added to the notes here. We have an exit survey that we're going to send out to everyone through email, along with the folder of resources like the resolutions. We'll probably have a follow-up meeting because we only had a limit of 100 people, but we expected a lot more. It was just a problem with Zoom that we're working on. So we should have capacity for 500 people. And I also want to say that we have other committees in NEU that if you're concerned with equitable distance learning, fighting back against austerity, and building statewide groups like the national or the Educators United groups in your state or other states, then you can go to NEU for information about that. National Educators United on Facebook has a form to fill out to join a committee. Yep, that's it. Thanks.
All right. So who is up next?
Darren, I think, is introducing our guest speakers.
Hey, everybody. Darren from Seattle. I didn't realize I was doing this, but I will do it. We've got two guest speakers. One of the issues that National Educators United is taken very seriously is doing solidarity with other frontline workers. So we've done solidarity with nurses on April 15th that did an action on tax day. And then on May 1st, we did solidarity with all the frontline workers going on strike and taking actions. Amazon, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's two struggles that are currently ongoing that we wanted to give space to speak to. The first speaker is Edgar Franks. He's the political director of Familias, Unidas por la Justicia, which is based in Washington State. There's, I won't go into all the details, I'll let him do it, but there's some strikes going on at Apple warehouse workers in Washington State. And so he's gonna give us some background on that. There's some slides for where to donate, a petition that I wrote up, articles to read. I did an interview with Edgar that folks should check out on the NEU Facebook Live. The link is on there. And then once he's done, then Melissa Rakestraw, who is, you can see on the screen, I won't repeat it. She's a postal worker in a suburb just outside of Chicago. They are fighting also, like all frontline workers, for safety issues, but also against the privatization of the Postal Service. So go ahead, Edgar Franks. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy that you're taking time out of your busy schedule to share the story of what's going on in Yakima.
Hello, and thank you for inviting us. It was good to see Darren on the picket line the other day. We had our concerns first when we saw him. He was a white guy filming people wearing like a Donald Trump shirt that, he couldn't see it from far away. But once we got close, we found out he was a friendly guy. So thank you, Darren, and everyone on the call. So me and my colleague, the president of our union, Ramon Torres, have been out here in Yakima since May 8th, supporting a series of strikes that have organically popped up here in the Yakima Valley. It's kind of an interesting situation that we have here because this is the heart of Apple country, probably in the world. And workers that primarily are Latino, maybe 70% women, are out here now striking, basically, literally for their lives. The first strike that went out was Allen Brothers in the town of Natchez, where over 20 confirmed cases of COVID had occurred in this one plant of maybe 250, 300 workers. So they went out on strike, calling for the company to do something to protect them and have some safeguards, especially enforcing social distancing and providing personal protective equipment and hazard pay. So as soon as they went out on strike, maybe a couple of days later, we got a call from another company called Jack Frost in Yakima. And then within 30 minutes of that one, we got a call from another one at Matson in the town of Sella. And then eventually over the days, 3 more companies joined, which is Columbia Reach, Monson, and Henson. All these are big fruit companies and packing houses where people are literally working, shoulder to shoulder or back to back with no barriers to protect them. All these places have had many cases of COVID. And in some cases, some of their family members have been sick and in critical condition in the hospital. So we're out here, organizing something that hasn't been, this type of activity hasn't been seen in like a generation here in the Yakima Valley. So we're living in a historic time, and I think it's very much needed so, because the issue of worker health and safety and retaliation and union busting has always existed here in the Yakima Valley and anywhere there's a large immigrant workforce. And so it makes it really difficult to organize, but the workers here took it upon themselves to take public direct action against their employers. And it's been a long, hard fight. Workers are out. A couple of days ago, somebody started a hunger strike. It's almost been 2 weeks for some companies and others on 10 days. So it's almost like a test of wills of who's gonna bend, but we know that time is not on the side of the workers, and the companies can pretty much wait out. But it's seeing the workers here and their toughness and their drive. Today we were able to actually get an agreement between the workers and one of the companies at Monson, where they both signed an agreement on the conditions of them to go back to work. What if the company provided safety provisions and followed all the regulations and rules from the state and the CDC, and also as well for the company to recognize the worker committee as there's issues that the committee negotiate with the employer to, if they want to talk about wages or other things. So it was positive, but that's just one out of the 5 places, and we're still out here organizing with the workers. And it's hot, it's been windy sometimes, it's been rainy, so we get everything, but the workers are here. A lot of the workers are elderly women that have been working in these conditions for most of their life and never seen a raise. other than the state mandated minimum wage increase. So for them, it's not just about money, it's about dignity and challenging power, especially in the face of the pandemic, where these essential workers aren't being treated and pretty much thrown out there so the Apple industry can keep profiting. But yeah, I mean, in a brief history about us, we're an independent farm worker union in Washington State. We did a boycott of Driscoll's for 3.5 years. And we eventually got the first farm worker contract in like 35 years in Washington State. So, and we actually are renegotiating our contract today. When I jump off this call, we have to jump on to negotiations with the company where we have our contract. But for the meanwhile, we're here on the ground with over 500 workers or so. And we'll be here as long as it takes for them to get some kind of justice.
Darren, do you want to, and thank you, Edgar, for being here. Darren, do you want to just talk about this, how we can help sort of support page?
Sure, I'll just do that real quick. Folks can see it. We'll share all these slides. The first link is to the homepage for Familias Unidas. To click, don't just click on the donate button. It's a little wonky on the site. If you scroll down on the homepage to the middle of the homepage, there's a button that says under the main picture, it says donate. These are the folks that are working hard to support the workers out on strike. So consider a donation. I wrote up this solidarity petition to kind of both help educate people about the issues, but also show solidarity until every worker goes back with no retaliation. We've got their back. So consider signing that and passing it along. Anyone in Washington State, there's a link there, strike support form if you want to help out. And then there's one more slide, Rebecca, on this, or actually two more. Here's phone numbers for all the companies. If you got time, call them, put pressure on them. And then the last slide is how to educate yourself. There's a couple great articles by David Bacon you should check out. And then I did an interview with Edgar on the picket line. It's a long Facebook Live video, but it starts around 17, almost 18 minutes in. So thank you so much, Edgar, for speaking. Next up is Melissa Rakestraw from the Chicago area.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Darren. And thanks to all of you out there with the National Educators United. I am a letter carrier with United States Postal Service. I've been carrying mail for over 20 years. And currently, I'm sure you all are aware of the fact that the post office has now become a political football for Donald Trump to try to take out his personal beef with Jeff Bezos because of the fact that the post office delivers Amazon parcels on Sundays and has an exclusive contract with them to do so. And Trump has somehow conflated the idea that raising parcel rates by 400% will somehow hurt Bezos. And that ignores the fact that Bezos has actually gotten his own delivery service up and running. And every day, generally, postal workers aren't delivering the majority of Amazon packages. Those are being delivered by his own fleet of low-paid workers who are out there day in and day out now, just like ourselves, essential workers trying to get packages and needed goods to customers all across the country. And the postal struggle and the effort to stop the privatization of the United States Postal Service is something that just didn't happen this year and with this current crisis and pandemic. The current pandemic has cut first-class mail and ad mail to such an extent that the post office believes by September they will not have enough money to continue to operate. So it is indeed dire. In the first stimulus package, they put in a $10 billion loan for the post office. but the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, said the post office can only have that money if they're willing to raise rates by 400% on packages, which makes no sense right now when people can't afford that kind of increase. We also deliver 2/3 of FedEx and UPS's packages with our last mile service. Mnuchin has said that the post office has to renegotiate all the contracts with the postal unions and lower worker wages by 22%. So these kind of attacks are draconian, especially when you think that the post office delivers at least 4 million prescriptions every single day, 6 days a week. The VA sends out all of their medications to veterans through the post office. We have some states that are now only vote by mail. We have the census going on through the mail. You know, Trump has said if vote by mail is allowed to go through, that, you know, he won't win or they won't win, that kind of thing. We have stimulus checks that are going out through the mail. We have testing kits that are going to be able to be put out through the mail. So it's really crucial that service not be interrupted. You know, our unions are trying to band together and get support from our constituents, because polls have showed that over 90% of Americans support the post office and believe that it should be fully funded during this time of crisis and need, so that there isn't any chance that service can be interrupted. You know, throughout the Postal Service, for the most part, we've been able to keep operations going. There have been some areas where there's been an outbreak of COVID amongst workers. So far, over 50 postal workers have died from COVID. So, you know, it's been a struggle for us to try to get safety protocols put in place to protect us on the workroom floor and as we're doing our jobs. You know, PPE that we need, but then we also are now looking at a fight to save our very survival. So we want that public support that we know our union brothers and sisters and union siblings offer to us across the labor movement. The teachers have been an inspiration in the wave of teacher strikes and rebellions that we've seen. And we're all going to need more actions like that to help demand what all workers need in this society and turn things back in our direction. So I would ask folks to check out a website. It's called usmailnotforsale.org. That's usmailnotforsale.org. And there's resources there on contacting your representatives to let them know that you support a fully funded post office. And we especially need the support from folks who are in red states, because we need the senators in the red states to get on board with this. Generally, we have the support, but it's hard with the White House right now, obviously, for all of us. So folks could do that. Another great resource is there's a Facebook page called Save Our Postal Service. You'll see signs on there you can download and put up window signs that show that you support saving the post office. And it would be really great way for folks to additionally show your solidarity with us. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all for a few minutes and try and get our struggle out there. And because, you know, we're supporting, I worked with the Chicago Teacher Solidarity Campaign and fully understand how we have to stop privatization in our school system, as well as the Postal Service, as well as every public service. So thanks so much.
And thank you. It's incredible. So we have some slides here, and yes, we will be providing all of this information for everyone to take action. So here's next steps. Here's another slide. And I think that is all. Thank you for being here. Are there, let's see. I think we are right at 5:30. Look how amazing that is. So if there, just to kind of close us out, we will, if you're listening on the Facebook page, I apologize. We were supposed to have 500 capacity for this meeting, but got cut off at 100. Whoever registered, though, we do have your information, and we will send out all of the resources, the union resolution, the pledge. All of these slides will be in a PDF form so that you can just click on the links whenever you want to. And so stay tuned for that follow-up email. And thanks everyone for being here. And thanks to all the facilitators for doing such a good job. And that closes us out for now.
Thank you. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Happy vacation, everyone who was in Arizona.
Arizona break. Woo!
Yay. Bye.